So, as I said, you're really welcome this evening. Going to go through a bit of background on the Green Schools Biodiversity theme, and then we'll go through kind of the 7-step process that is involved in terms of completing your work on the theme, and hopefully you get lots of tips and ideas for what you can do in your school. So before we get into that, just a tiny bit of background on Green Schools. Green Schools is part of the Environmental Education Unit of Antashka. So there's lots of other education programs there. Some of them you might be able to link in with your work, like National Spring Clean, or if you're near one of our Blue Flag beaches, there's a lot of campaigns there that you might be able to link up with. And the Green Schools program is an international program, so it's run in countries all around the world. It's in over 70 different countries. It's generally known as eco schools outside of Ireland, but the same 7-step process that we're all doing here is being run around the world. And we hope that it's a long-term and whole school action for schools to get involved with. Green Schools is very much an inclusive program, so we want to invite as many people as possible to get involved with something that affects us all. So that's kind of improving our sustainability practices. So we want to make sure everybody feels really welcome. And in Ireland, it's a program that is very popular in terms of the amount of schools taking part. Just under 90% of Irish schools are registered with Green Schools, and we've had 3,350 schools being awarded at least one green flag, and that adds up to a really huge number of students, teachers, and schools participating. When you kind of take the work people are doing all together, it becomes really impactful and really impressive. So speaking of being really impactful and impressive, we are encouraging you to consider nominating yourselves or another teacher in your school for the FEE Global Teacher Award. FEE is the Foundation for Environmental Education, and they are the organisation that runs green schools or eco schools at an international level. And last year we actually had an Irish teacher who was a winner, and so do consider all of the work that you are doing on this program and in other programs on your school. And if you want to have a look at this more, you can find out more at their website. So it's fee.ie.global/teacher award. And as I said, there might be some of the environmental awareness officers dropping in this evening. If they don't, I'll just give you their contact information here. So we have schools from both Kerry and Cork County and Cork City Council. So generally, if you are in a school in Cork County Council, your main contact will be David McElroy. And David is actually a Green Schools officer, but he works with a lot of the Cork County Council schools directly. So you can get in touch with David with any queries. And then Michelle Green is the Environmental Awareness Officer for Cork. And so while David will be doing a lot of the renewal visits and things like that with you, Michelle, you might hear from Michelle this year as well about some initiatives that are happening. And then Breda Moriarty is the AO for Kerry County Council. And then for Cork City Council, we have Una Leader. And just as I say her name, see, Una has entered the call. Una, do you want to say hello while I have the slide open with your details on it? Are you there, Una? Do you want to say hi?
That was perfect timing. Yes.
Yes, perfect.
My name is Una Leader. I work for Cork City Council, and I'm available to help schools with Green Schools, kind of talk you through what's involved and application form, and kind of just get to know, particularly for the biodiversity schools. The thing is, the Cork City Council biodiversity officers they've agreed to go and visit the schools on the biodiversity theme. It's a new thing we're doing. So if there's any Cork City schools on the biodiversity theme who haven't been in touch with me yet, so that you're not on my radar, do get in touch with me, because I can line up the biodiversity officers to visit you, and those visits are going to come through me, and they're great just to give ideas and just to have someone out in your school. I'll put all my contact details are there. That's great. Thank you, Claire.
Thanks, Una. Yeah, so just to reiterate for everybody, it is really great to get in touch with your EAO, because they can link you in with things that are happening locally. And as Una mentioned there, most of the county councils have biodiversity officers, so it's a new role in most county councils. And there may be opportunities for the EAO to link you in with actions that the biodiversity officers are taking, or projects they have planned. So don't be shy about getting in touch. So just moving on to another kind of interesting and pretty exciting topic is the fact that An Taisce this year and next year has been allocated an SDG champion. So you're probably all familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. These are a set of goals that were put in place by the leaders of the UN to try and achieve a more sustainable future. And An Taisce has been selected, along with a few other organizations, to be an SDG champion and to promote the work that they're doing. And the work that you're all doing on the biodiversity theme links in really strongly with particularly Goal 15, Life on Land. So it's just something to kind of have in the back of your mind, that the work that you are doing on this theme is kind of linking in with things on a global perspective. And I also just see that David has just joined us. But David, do you want to say hello? So David is representing Cork County Council. You want to say hi, David?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone. So I'm a Green Schools Officer. I'm based in Cork County. But on behalf of Cork County Council, I also facilitate green schools in the county. So when you're booking your renewal visit, or if you have any questions or queries, or would just like any advice in relation to green schools in your school, please do feel free to get in touch with me. I'll pop my email in the chat, and yeah, I look forward to hearing from you. So thanks a million. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, David. Okay, so just to give you an idea of where you are in the Green Schools program, biodiversity is theme 5. It's the last of the Green Schools kind of core themes. So when you move on from biodiversity, you won't be going on to a totally new theme. We kind of track back to where you started on litter and waste, but we look at it from a global perspective. So that GC there stands for global citizenship. So this is the last time you'll be undertaking something totally new. And from my very biased perspective as biodiversity officer, it's definitely a really nice one to work on. And there's hopefully lots of opportunities for you to kind of pick things that your school is interested in taking part in, or maybe things that have importance at a local level. So hopefully it can be an enjoyable theme. And we're supported by National Parks and Wildlife Service. So one of their objectives is to increase awareness of biodiversity, and they encourage this by supporting us and supporting the schools taking part. And just to show you a few stats on, what kind of impact the schools working on this program have. It's really amazing, some of the statistics we find. So this is the results of the schools who were awarded a flag last year. So we had 747 schools awarded, and you can pick out, any of those themes there. We look at litter and waste. We had 73% of schools taking part reduced the amount of waste going to landfill, and 66% of schools carrying out a cleanup in their community. So it's pretty impressive when you add these things together. And if we look at the biodiversity schools in more depth, last year schools on the theme planted over 6,500 trees. They created 330 new vegetable gardens, over 600 new bird feeding stations, and hundreds of bug hotels and log piles and ponds and so on. So there is a great numbers of new habitats and new features being created, which is brilliant. And just to give you a little bit of background on biodiversity itself and why it's important, just have a few slides on this because biodiversity, the word can be a little bit tricky to understand, especially for younger students. So the simplest way to explain it is that biodiversity, it means all living things. So it's all the different types of living creatures, from flowers to birds and insects, to also even smaller things like fungi and bacteria. So anything living is part of biodiversity. And the big take-home message of this theme is that the more different types of living things you have, the better it is. So if you have a really diverse wildflower meadow, it's going to be much healthier and much more resilient and provide much more benefits to the environment than if you have grassland with just one type of grass growing. And that can be applied to any type of wildlife. So the more that biodiversity or the more diversity we have, the better it is. And there's no end of possible things that you can look into on this theme. We have got huge numbers of different types of plants and animals in Ireland. And we do like this theme to focus on Irish wildlife as opposed to wildlife abroad, because there is so much here to look into. You're probably not going to focus your attention on the 1,400 different types of algae or the 1,000 different types of lichens, but it's just to show these options are there, and you can choose to look into maybe what schools are interested in, but also what's local to your school, your area. And why is biodiversity so important? Why have we chosen this as a theme? You're probably all aware of this. There's so many reasons why. I could go on about it all day. But just really briefly, as you know, plants and trees are really important for storing carbon. So they're taking carbon dioxide from the air and giving us oxygen. Lots of animals are really important natural predators, and they help keep the ecosystem in balance. So that ladybird there feeding on green flies or aphids. As you know, if you're a gardener and you really want to attract ladybirds to your garden, they'll keep down numbers of pests. Animals play a huge role in terms of producing food. So pollinators like bees are pollinating many of our crops. And then the biodiversity in our soil, like worms and also hundreds of other species, are really important for recycling nutrients in the soil. Then we also have things like preventing or filtering out some water pollution, as well as providing spaces for recreation and enjoyment. All of the food we eat comes from biodiversity. Most of the medicines that we take, and also many of the products that we use in everyday life, are all coming from biodiversity. And there's also many species whose value we don't know yet, haven't been studied yet. And I do always like to emphasize as well that it's really easy to get into kind of the trap of evaluating or looking at something, going, how does it help humans? What is their value to us? But it is good to also just kind of build that kind of connection to nature and allow students to understand that biodiversity has its own value. It's not all about how they can benefit people. However, a counterpoint to that, it is also there is also a big financial incentive to protect biodiversity. It's valued at over 2.6 billion euros each year. Much of that is down to the work of our worms and pollinators in terms of their value for agriculture, and then also a huge chunk of that comes from tourism. But despite how important biodiversity is, we aren't treating it very well, sadly. So I won't dwell too much on this, but we are in the midst of a biodiversity crisis. It's one we don't hear as much about as the climate crisis, but it's just as real and it's just as impactful. So biodiversity is being lost at a really, really steep rate. And just quickly give you the main reasons for this. I won't go into any of the dire statistics, so don't worry too much. But just to be aware that the biggest cause of biodiversity loss is that we are losing many of the habitats that supports the most biodiversity. And habitat loss can either be in the form of a whole area being destroyed, like let's say a forest is cut down, obviously the plants and the animals and the mosses and everything that was growing there are going to be lost. And then you also have what's called habitat fragmentation. This is just when, rather than destroying a habitat, it's broken into different sections. So this could be that same woodland, rather than it being destroyed, a road was built through it. So only a small area appears to be affected, but actually by breaking it up into different sections, it can really play an impact on especially the animals that are living within it. They might need a particular size of range to have to be able to survive. So those two factors of losing habitats are the biggest problems. And then we also have issues like litter and pollution, which can cause a lot of damage. Climate change is having a bigger and bigger impact on biodiversity. Makes a lot of sense when you think about it, that the quick changes in weather patterns are going to affect plants and animals, so their whole their life cycles and their diets are really dictated by changes being caused by the weather. You might notice these things yourself kind of casually, like for example, this year you probably noticed that blackberries were out really early, so that is being triggered by what's happening in terms of the temperatures and the overall weather. So when plants begin to change, when they're going into flower, into fruit, etc., this has a knock-on effect on the animals which feed on them and rely on them for shelter, etc. So there's lots of possible impacts for climate change, and in Ireland they can be especially susceptible because land-based animals aren't able to migrate north or south, which maybe animals might be doing naturally in mainland Europe or other large continents. Another big factor is we call overexploitation. So this just means when animals or plants are used to such a degree or they don't have a chance to recover, for example, overfishing. And then lastly, invasive species. So this is something that doesn't get quite as much attention, but they have a really big impact on driving biodiversity loss. So an invasive species is one that is not native to a region and which also causes damage. So it could be a plant, it could be an animal. You're probably familiar with rhododendron, Japanese knotwood, two plants which are highly invasive, which can spread very quickly and make it very difficult for other plants to grow. And grey squirrel there is an example of a invasive animal species. So, okay, that's all the negative stuff out of the way. This is our reset slide. That's kind of all just background for yourselves to give you a bit of background on why we are focusing on this topic as a theme. It's not necessarily something that you'll be working on a lot with your students. We kind of hope that the biodiversity theme is a bit more positive, focuses on solutions to biodiversity loss, making small positive changes in your communities, and also allowing students to kind of build a connection with nature, with biodiversity, and spend some time outside. So now I'm just going to go through the actual 7 steps of this theme and how to work on it in your school. So step 1 of the Green Schools program is always to set up a committee. You can set up a committee in lots of different ways. Some schools will hold elections. People will nominate themselves to be on the committee, and they might be voted in by their classmates. If you're in a primary school, you might prefer to to kind of nominate the students directly by the teachers, or even have a lottery system. And it's really up to you, to yourselves, how you pick which students will be on the committee. In secondary schools, you might have a lot of students from transition year, and that's fine. The only kind of essential components of creating a committee is that you must have students on it, and you must have at least one staff member who's going to be the coordinator. And the students will hopefully be as involved as possible. You know, we really want students to be involved in coming up with ideas for actions and making decisions as much as possible. And then, as well as having these people on your committee, you can also try and recruit some extra staff members, particularly for yourselves as coordinators. It can be really helpful to have a bit of support. If you have got somebody like a caretaker or a groundskeeper, they mightn't be able to come to all your committee meetings, but it's really great if they can either lend their expertise or somehow just keep them in the loop, particularly if you're going to be outside more often and maybe making small changes to the grounds. You want to be on the same page with anybody working on them. And if you do have any parents or community members maybe who are interested in gardening or who work in an area related to biodiversity, again, maybe they can just drop in and do a session with your committee or with a class in the school. And it is important to try and keep everybody involved. So especially in a secondary school setting, you might be less likely to have students from exam years or the senior cycle. So making sure that students on the committee are communicating with everyone, keeping people updated about what's going on, and drawing people in wherever they can. Okay, so once you have your committee up and running, the second step is to carry out your environmental review. So an environmental review means that you are looking at your school and seeing what is the situation around biodiversity now? Do we know a lot about it? Are our grounds really attractive for biodiversity? Are we in a bit more of a concrete jungle? So the two essential parts of the review, and essential means that they are two things that you will be asked about when you come to apply for your flag. So there are two things that you need to document. These two things are to carry out an awareness survey and to create a habitat map. And I'll show you both of these things now. So this is your awareness survey, and it's 4 questions, and it's asking people what do they already know about biodiversity. Don't worry too much if people know very little. That's fine. We don't really look at your applications and judge in terms of what stats you're getting here. And we generally get pretty low levels of knowledge at the beginning. So you can kind of adapt this a little bit if you want, in terms of you can add additional questions. You can do it online. Many secondary schools, if you have an information sharing system like Teams or Moodle, you put it up on that and send it around that way. If you're in a really large school, you don't have to do this with every single student. So you might exclude the infants classes, could be quite hard for them. But do just try and keep a record of which classes you carried it out with, because you will be asked to repeat this survey in the second year. So you want to be comparing like with like. So that's the survey, and this is something it's good to try and get done early on in your work on the theme. So, before the Halloween break, if possible, just so that you haven't, started doing any awareness raising before you do your survey. The second essential action is to create a habitat map. So these are all examples of habitat maps here and our pictures. It's basically any kind of visual representation of your school grounds. And the idea behind it is to kind of give you a bit of a tool for planning. It's like a baseline in terms of going, well, what are our school grounds like now? Do we have a lot of green space? Is there any kind of habitats? Like, is there a hedgerow? Do we have a playing pitch? Is there any area that we could maybe let go a bit wild? Is there room to plant bulbs or seeds or trees? Is there already a wild area that has lots of biodiversity that maybe we could investigate or study? So it's trying to kind of scope out what's there. This is a nice example that a school has done, where they have kind of added in photographs around the outside of their map, and they could make it kind of like a living document. So as the seasons changed, they could show how the grounds was changing. When they added in a feature, they could add in a photograph with it as well. We have a lot of resources to help you with your habitat map. So there's a lesson plan that you can use in school. It brings you really in detail on how to complete it. It has a checklist you can bring with you outside, suggestions for what kind of habitats are commonly found. And last year we also did a webinar for teachers that was just about food, or just about habitat maps, and it brings you through it step by step. So we have a recording of that webinar available. When we share this presentation at the end, you can get access to it by clicking there on webinar and on the presentation, which goes along with it. So those are the two kind of essential parts of your environmental review. You can also choose to go into much more detail and really investigate what kind of species you have growing in terms of plants, what kind of animals do you have visiting. And this can end up being part of your action plan, which I'll show you in a minute. When you are recording or investigating, don't get too bogged down in terms of being able, knowing the name of every single species you see. It's just not possible to be an expert on everything. I always say it's kind of more about the going out and noticing things. You can take pictures of what you find. You can have students sketch what they find, try and work out what it is later. And depending on what time of year it is, you might choose to look at trees or flying insects if it's summertime, or birds if it's winter. So we have a lot of resources to help you with these things. I'll come on to showing you in a minute. Step 3 then is to create an action plan. So based on what you found in your environmental review, it might help inform, what do you need to do to increase people's awareness, or what kind of changes could you make to your grounds or in your local community or at home. So the main aims are increasing awareness and making practical changes. But within those overall aims, there's a huge amount of flexibility. We understand that every school will be different in terms of what their grounds are like, what their resources are like, what their students are interested in. So we're not prescriptive here in terms of what you do to fulfill these objectives. There's a lot of different opportunities there. So one thing I would recommend is having a look at our Nature's calendar. So this, again, you can click on that link. It will bring you to a page on our website, which has got some suggested activities for each month of the year, and a simple spotter sheet for each month of the year that has 6 things that you could look out for that month. And that just gives you some ideas for practical things you can be doing outside, or just usually one for indoors as well. You can, like I said, you can go and try and find out what species you have around you. Maybe look into anything that's especially relevant to your local area. Looking into place names and how they're linked can be a nice thing to do. And one of my colleagues today just told me that 20% of Irish place names are linked to trees or other biodiversity. So that can be something to investigate. Generally trying to, like I said, build in that outdoor time with students is really helpful, and trying to develop a connection with nature. And then in terms of practical improvements, as I say, this will really depend on what your grounds are like. If you do have green space, is there an area, even a verge that you can leave unmanaged? This is the simplest way in some ways of attracting biodiversity, just by not mowing the grass or not trimming back the hedge. It can really attract things to come in. And then you can also, plant native trees and flowers. So today is National Tree Day. So happy National Tree Day to everyone. And it's one of two kind of big events during the year. They also have a National Tree Week, which will be in March. And there are a lot of opportunities for schools to plant trees. There's several organizations that provide free trees to schools. If you are interested in that, you can also talk to your environmental awareness officer. They sometimes are involved in working with some of those organizations to distribute them. And if you are planting seeds, just a little word of warning on buying packets of wildflower mixes or pre-made seed bombs. They often are not great quality. So if you are looking to buy seeds, I would really recommend buying a packet that is just of one specific species rather than a mixed wild meadow or something like that. We have gotten a lot of feedback from schools and from community groups that they may not work very well. You can always go and collect seeds. So at this time of year, in autumn, there's a lot of seeds you can collect. Lots of flowers gone to seeds, lots of trees producing seeds you can collect and plant, and that way you already know that they are suitable to grow in your local area. You could consider growing food crops. You don't need big raised beds to do this, so you can grow in any kind of containers, in old tires, in a broken wheelbarrow, any container that you can drill a hole in and have a bit of drainage will work. And then there's tons of different types of habitats you can create, from mini ponds to piles of logs, piles of leaves. And if you are really limited in terms of space, or if you don't have much green space, doing things like hanging bird boxes or bat boxes or bird feeders, things you can even hang on the walls of the school, or putting up window boxes on the windowsills. So it's about using the space that you do have. There are tons of online websites and groups that exist on all different kinds of biodiversity. I've just kind of flagged these because if you do start Googling different birds or insects or things, or there's some apps that you might download that are based on biodiversity, you might come across organizations based in the UK or the US. It is really good to try and use Irish sources, just because the wildlife here is different to the wildlife in other countries, and it can be confusing if you're seeing suggestions for things that aren't here at all. So there's just a few nice options for you to look at. For the secondary schools here, if you want to get involved in some citizen science, the National Biodiversity Data Centre is a really good place to start. And they collect information from people all around the country about the biodiversity that they are finding around them. So you can submit your information of what you've seen outside, and they will add it to their big database. They also have projects that you can get involved with, like bumblebee surveys and backyard biodiversity. So they have kind of some that are more simple and some that are more complicated. The pollinator plan have tons of great resources, including a junior pollinator plan, which is really good for primary schools. And they also have a school pollinator plan, which is good for all schools, where it kind of tells you how you can make your school grounds more pollinator friendly. And you can also look into some of our national parks. The National Parks and Wildlife Service have got loads of information about them, so you can find out why they're so important. So if you're down in Kerry, you can look into Killarney. What is it that they're protecting? Here's our sample action plan. You'll find this in the biodiversity handbook. So if anyone is on their first year on the theme, you will have gotten in the post your handbook and some information in the last week or so. If you haven't gotten that, go check maybe in the school office. Sometimes we have the wrong coordinator details on the front, so just make sure it hasn't arrived. And so the action plan, you know, you can take as many ideas from this if you want as you want, and it is helpful to put in who's going to be responsible for carrying out that action and when you hope to do it. So it's a good way of splitting up the work, maybe allocating a particular action to an individual class or a group of students on the committee, etc. Okay, then step 4 is monitoring and evaluation. So this step, you know, you're likely to be doing in your second year on the theme. And it's basically a repeat of their environmental review. You're looking back and seeing what has changed since you've been carrying out your actions on the action plan. So you're repeating the awareness survey and you are seeing what has changed on your habitat map. So you can create a new habitat map, or you can fill in what changes have been made since you originally created it. Don't get too bogged down in terms of have the numbers of species increased on your school grounds. It's very difficult to actually do that quickly in a small space. Focusing on things like increasing the amount of wildflowers or pollinators is probably your best option there if you want to see real changes in the amount of things visiting your school. But that's not a focus for us in terms of your application form. So here's the awareness survey. These were our average results last year. So like I said, it usually in year 1, the knowledge tends to be quite low, and we kind of like generally see a big improvement in year 2. And then again, this is a year 2 habitat map. So this school has marked on changes that they made. One interesting thing this school did was they, if you see these brown squares marked as quadrats, these were areas that they left unmanaged. They didn't cut the grass, didn't tidy them up in any way. And they were able to use those as like little experiments where they could compare what kind of species they found inside those squares versus outside. Then step 5 is curriculum work. So this is basically linking the work you're doing as part of the Green Schools theme with the existing curriculum. So when you were filling in your application form, you'll be asked about this, and we have a simple template where it's just saying what subject is it, and what was done as part of that subject that was connected with the biodiversity theme. And a handy thing to do could be pass that around the staff room and just ask teachers to mark in anything that they did that they think is relevant. There is lots of potential links, so whoever is working on the awareness survey will be looking at things like percentages. They might be creating graphs and charts. There's loads of links, obviously, with science and SDSE. There's great potential for involving art and maybe a poster competition. We had a recent secondary school. They had an art competition where they had to design a mural that they were going to put onto the wall of their new school garden. Also things like creating signage, lots of links to things like home ec and woodwork. If your school has a woodwork department, that's great. Maybe you can ask them to make you some bird boxes or window boxes. If you're a primary school and there's a local secondary school nearby, see maybe would they like to do a project for you. Tons of links with history. The list is endless. Then we have step 6, which is informing and involving. So this is basically about making sure that everybody is aware of what's going on and there are opportunities for them to participate. And so in terms of your school community, you want people to be aware of what you have going on. So you might be using your Green Schools notice board, any kind of internal communication systems you have, like Teams. If you have a school newsletter or social media, it can be nice to just add in a few pictures of what you're doing. Another essential action for this theme is to have an action day. An action day is basically where you one day, usually most schools have it in their second year on the theme, where everyone in the school gets involved in some kind of activity to celebrate the work that the school has done in biodiversity. It could be a planting in the school grounds. You could go out and do a cleanup in the local community. You could be hosting biodiversity quizzes. There's loads of options. Some schools will link it in with an existing day like Biodiversity Day or Tree Week. You can link it in with National Spring Clean or a Clean Coast event if you're by the coast. And can you link in with any of your community members that, like I said, are have expertise in a relevant area? The last step then is to create a green code. This is just something that shows what your school's attitude is to the theme. It can be in any format you like. Many schools will do a slogan, and it could also be a song. It could be a longer code of conduct, and it can be nice again to involve lots of students by having a whole school competition, and selecting the winner, and then just making sure that it's displayed in your school. So those are the 7 steps. Hopefully you can see that there is a lot of flexibility within them. Just a few examples of what schools often do. So big popular activities are things like tree planting, bird boxes, and insect hotels. So that insect hotel in the bottom right hand corner there. So big, large project to undertake. But you can do much simpler versions of this where, you create piles of logs. Insects will love that just as much. Or putting out an old doormat on, the grass or bare soil. That will attract lots of insects as well. So see what works for you. And then the real nitty gritty here is the renewal process. So if you are in your second year of the theme, or if you've been on the theme longer than that, then you can apply for your green flag this year. And there's 2 steps in terms of the application process. So 1 is to fill out our application form, and 2 is to have a renewal visit. So the application form must be submitted by March 15th. It's an online form, and I'd really advise everyone to have a look at that early on. So even if you're in your first year on the theme, have a look at the application form now, because it's a really helpful guide. It shows you exactly what you need to be documenting, and you can fill it in as you go. So if you do your awareness survey this month, you can put in the results of that now. So rather than, a year and a half later trying to go back and find them, you can pop them in now. And you cannot send in your application form until you've had your renewal visit. So that can be arranged with your EAO at any stage in the second year of the theme. So you don't have to have done every action on your action plan, and you can talk about what you plan to do in the future. It's a really nice opportunity for the students, especially on the committee, to talk about the work that they've done and get a bit of positive feedback. And at this stage, you might also get a bit of advice. So if the EAO feels, oh, maybe you should add in a little bit of extra information on this topic, you have the chance to do that before you put in your form. So that's all has to be done by 15th of March. And then we'll assess your application and get back to you. Hopefully everybody will be successful. And last year we went back to having our award ceremonies in person. So that was great to have, and hopefully that will continue again this year. Okay, and then another really exciting thing to let you know about is that this is our first year where we will be having a biodiversity school of the year, both for primary schools and for secondary schools. So we'll be selecting the winners based on your application forms. So you don't have to do anything to apply. We will just be automatically entering all schools who apply for their green flag and biodiversity. And if you are successful, you'll be awarded with the Biodiversity Schools of the Year during the national award ceremonies. So speaking of EAO visits, I think our final EAO of the evening has arrived. Yeah, do you want to say hi, Breda? Hi, Breda. I was just saying, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself? No, I might come back to you at the end if you're still there. So just before I finish up, a few events and details for the diary. So I said today is Tree Day. We had a webinar on the hazel tree today at 11. So I just changed this slide today. So rather than asking you to register to take part, if you missed it and would like to go back, you can watch the recording. And then for our secondary schools, I'll be sending you an email about this next week, but something we are promoting is the Bio Bus. So this is a mobile exhibit that is going to be going around all 26 counties during October and November. And they would really like some green schools working on the biodiversity theme to attend, and you can actually book in a slot and get a tour of this exhibit. It should be really interesting. It's all about alternatives to fossil fuels and things that can kind of power things we use every day. So you can find out more about it by clicking that link, but I will be emailing particularly the secondary schools about this. And then coming up throughout the year, we're going to have a seasonal biodiversity challenge for you. Our first one up is to find and identify as many different seeds as possible. So what school is able to find the most different kinds? You can send your entries to me at bioevents@eeu.antashka.org or tag us on social media, and we will have a prize for the school who collects the most different varieties. And then further ahead, don't have much information about these yet, but just to pop in the diary, National Tree Week is March 18th to 22nd. We always have a lot of events for this. And then similarly in May, I know that's a busier time of the year, but we will be having week events for Biodiversity Week, which is May 20th to 24th. I would advise everyone checks out the website. We have a lot of resources on biodiversity. It can actually be a bit overwhelming. So if you start scrolling through our resource section, we don't expect you to do all of those activities. And to make it a bit simpler to navigate, we do have a theme page that has got the most important resources in one place. Lisa might share that with you in the chat there. I'd advise you to have a look at our case studies. We have a video case study for a primary school and a secondary school there, so you can kind of hear from the students themselves on what they did, and it's a nice thing to show to your committee members or to recruit them even. And then nearly at the end now, just a few projects that are open to all schools. So these aren't specific to the biodiversity theme. We have Climate Action Week coming up October 16th, so that's a Monday, and it's running all that week. There's tons of events on there that some of them are on during school time that you might want to get involved with. Actually on the Monday, we have a food waste webinar that might be of interest to the biodiversity schools. You can find information about that on the Green Schools events page. For any secondary schools there, and also for primary school teachers who are interested in becoming a climate ambassador in your community, the Climate Ambassador Program trains people to deliver climate actions and hold events in their community. So if you would like to apply to be an ambassador, you can learn more on their website. And then lastly, on the climate, this one is just for TY students. There is a free TY program for students all around the country. So it's an online program with 7 workshops that you can sign up for. But also actually for our Cork schools, there is an option to sign up for in-person workshops. So if you check out climatesmart.ie if you want to find out more about that. And then our other set of workshops. So Antashka runs these with SCAI, so sustainable energy workshops. They're free of charge for all schools. They have different workshops available for junior and senior primary, and then various levels of secondary schools. So if you want to learn a bit more about sustainable energy with your class and how to reduce your energy, you can sign up there. And then lastly, this is just our QR code to sign up for the website. So if you want to be updated with everything going on, all the Green Schools themes, you can scan that QR code and it'll bring you to sign up for the newsletter. Okay, phew, that was a lot of information to throw out there, but hopefully it's given you a bit of an overview. And really, what I would like to be the main take-home message is, if you do have questions at any stage this year, don't be afraid to get in touch. I'm happy to chat with you. So I think Lisa has added this PDF into the chat, so you can see the last page has all of those links I mentioned, and they're also embedded throughout. So I'm going to stop sharing and just check if anyone had any questions.